Tonight, before we go into anything else, I want to ask you to do a little inventory with your body. Notice how your body's feeling. And specifically, notice what is uncomfortable. Maybe it's something about your posture. Maybe something you ate doesn't feel exactly right. Maybe you're wondering if there's something in your teeth. Maybe you have a headache. It could be any number of things. For me, it is any number of things. I could make a long list. You know, I feel whenever I sit on the cushion, it always feels like the cushion is about a ½ inch too low or a ½ inch too high. And I'm trying to find exactly the right thing. I get hangnails and I kind of worry over them with my other fingers. I feel them there. Sometimes my nose itches. Especially in Zazen, my nose itches. When I move around, my joints creak. Sometimes I'm sore. I'm sitting here in my favorite posture. It's very stable. I'm happy to be here. And yet, I can do this inventory and I can see there are lots of things that feel just off, a little bit off. Not because I'm doing anything wrong necessarily, and not because I'm becoming a cranky old man, though I may be becoming a cranky old man, but just because I'm human. And this is what it is to have a body. They never quite feel exactly right. I think it's easy to lose sight of what this practice is, of what it's asking us to investigate, of where it's asking us to be. It's easy for it to become very heady. And I encourage that sometimes because I'll talk about, you know, some philosophical stance that Dogen took, for example, and the cosmological implications of that, and blah, 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 blah. And we lose sight of the basic principle. That this practice, if it takes place anywhere, is taking place in the body. We say body, breath, mind when we talk about Zazen. You put your body in order so that your breath is in order, so that your mind is in order. And in hearing that, we can understand that the body may come first, but even then we may misunderstand that the body is somehow a vessel for our spiritual selves. That the body is a vehicle that takes us to some spiritual destination. The body is the spiritual destination. You can go anywhere in the world and you will always be in the same place. Here. In this body that doesn't feel quite right. What do we do with that? What does that mean for us? We talk about dukkha, the first noble truth that all of life is dissatisfaction. And when we hear that, we go to all the things that we think are wrong with the world. or the things that are wrong with my life. It becomes very abstract very quickly. But there's another way to read those noble truths that is much more immediate. So let's translate for a moment dukkha as discomfort. It fits very well. All of life is characterized by discomfort. Number 2 says that the reason we feel discomfort is because we imagine that we shouldn't. Because we have an idea of a baseline that we might call feeling 100%. So we measure this moment, this experience against that. And measured against that, nothing can ever feel quite right. Number 3 says, therefore, the way beyond discomfort is to let go of this idea of the baseline, to let go of the idea of comfort. And then the 4th says, there's a path to that. And that path of right view, right concentration, right meditation, right livelihood, etc., is a bunch of things that are kind of uncomfortable. We talk about this practice a lot in terms of maturity. So what is maturity? In very broad strokes, maturity is a word that we often use to mean the degree to which someone is able to handle discomfort. In children, the degree is 0. You know, with my own kids, there were these moments when they were toddlers. And if you have kids, you've had this, where you find yourself standing over a 3-year-old who is screaming that my sock doesn't feel right. I don't know what that is, but something is a tiny bit off. And it's a tragedy. It's a world stopper. You can't move forward from that. And then over time, it gets better. And it evolves. And maybe it isn't that the sock doesn't feel right, but now it's something like, I'm hungry. And because I'm hungry, the world has to stop. Because this is discomfort. And discomfort shouldn't exist. Discomfort, when it is noticed, should be fixed. I'm thirsty? Oh, I need to drink something right away. Right? It's cold? I need to fix it now. I'm tired of walking? Well, maybe I'll just stop walking. That's the child's view. But it doesn't go away. It just becomes more subtle. It evolves. Think about what you do when you need to scratch your nose. When your nose itches, or maybe your ear itches. Even as I'm saying this, my ear starts to itch. I can feel it. I think for most of us, if something starts to itch, we just scratch it. It's very simple. But whether we talk about this in terms of Zen or Buddhism or just being a human being who is growing up, there is an invitation for us when our ear itches or our nose itches to pause before we scratch it. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't because we're supposed to work through the pain, lean into it. There are aspects of monastic practice that are like that, where it's physically hard on purpose. And just as a kind of footnote to this, I'll acknowledge that in my own life, some of the most transformative moments I've had have been those moments when I pushed myself, or more often when someone else pushed me to push myself beyond what I thought I could endure in terms of discomfort. So that my bar for what I could handle moved. That kind of practice can be powerful, but that's not what I'm suggesting here. I don't think we need to be macho about this. I don't think that we need to test it in that way. And the reason is because we're uncomfortable already. We don't need to make ourselves more so. We need to start to notice. So your nose itches. And instead of scratching it, you pause. You notice the discomfort. You notice your reactivity to it. How probably without even thinking about it, without even consciously registering, my nose itches. You send a signal to another part of your body to resolve it. It can't stand. So you take a beat. You watch that instinct in yourself, and you watch how, if you take a few breaths, something changes. Maybe it doesn't itch anymore. That happens. Maybe you find that it still itches, but actually it doesn't feel like a big deal. Maybe it gets worse. And then maybe you scratch it. But in that pause, we see the most basic teachings of Buddhism playing out in real time in the body. We don't have to pretend that it's some other thing, that it's happening in the mind, that it's happening in the spiritual realm. Dissatisfaction is dissatisfaction. Discomfort is discomfort. If you can learn to pause before you scratch your nose, if you can learn to step back from that discomfort, to navigate it differently, that applies naturally to emotional discomfort, to psychological discomfort, to spiritual discomfort, to social discomfort. It's all the same thing. It's us either reacting without knowing what we're doing or pausing to respond. There's no happy part of this story where we relate to it in a particular way and then it goes away. Your nose is going to itch. Your back is going to hurt. Your knees are going to ache. Sometimes you'll sit in a chair and it seems like no matter how you sit in that chair, you can't get it right. That's just being alive. But in that little invisible dynamic of your body adjusting to the world, there is the entirety of spiritual practice playing out. And it matters. It matters for us and it matters for the people around us. Our ability to pause, our ability to work with the thing that doesn't feel quite right, to accept it, not because we'll never fix it and not because we like it, but because this is the reality of this moment. Period. We can refuse to see that, or we can see it directly. And in seeing it directly, something opens up. When Joan Amaral visited us last year, one of the things she talked about, and I won't say it as well as she did, was how part of what we do in Zazen is we learn to not move. And she was talking about in terms of fighting injustice. That when we are confronting injustice, we have to have the ability to not move. Well, what stops us from fighting injustice in the first place? It's discomfort. It's the discomfort of it. It's knowing that if we move into that space, if we go into that encounter, we will feel fear. We will feel stress. We will feel uncertainty. We know that so well that we can anticipate all of it so that we don't even show up. The path is very simple. It's very straight. That if you can't resist scratching your nose, you can't stand your ground. And so you start literally where you are. You start with who you are. This body is not something that we ignore. It's not a distraction or an irritation. When you feel pain somewhere in your body, that isn't something that you need to immediately resolve so that you can face your real life, so that you can face the real questions of your life, the real problems of your life. That is your real life. That is the real question of your life. We can engage deeply in Zen practice without ever indulging in things that feel particularly deep. We don't have to. We can dive into this practice all the way to the bottom. without getting stuck in our own heads, without ever feeling particularly profound, but just awake, just alert, just sensitive to what's happening now and to how we're responding to it. So the next time that you're feeling uncomfortable, and I'm guessing it's in the next few seconds, instead of addressing it, instead of trying to fix it, instead of changing it, before you do, take a few seconds with it. Pay attention to it, be with it, and recognize that in that discomfort, you're being offered a glimpse into everything you need to know. I'll stop there.